The Europa research station hung like a metallic spider against the endless ice fields of Jupiter's moon. Through the reinforced viewport of the main laboratory, Dr. Sophia Winters watched the drilling operation with growing anticipation. After 18 months of probing Europa's frozen surface, they were finally about to breach what appeared to be a massive cavity beneath the ice, potentially one of the moon's theorized subsurface oceans. Core sample extraction beginning in 3 minutes, announced Marcus Rodriguez, the lead drilling engineer. His voice carried a hint of excitement that belied his professional tone. Around the control room, the dozen other scientists and technicians moved with practiced efficiency, though Sophia could sense their collective anticipation. The drill's rhythmic humming suddenly changed pitch, and the monitors exploded with activity. "We've got breach," Marcus called out, his fingers flying across the control panel. "Cavity detected at 3,247 meters. Pressure differential stable. Initiating sample extraction." Sophia leaned closer to her monitor, watching as the probe's cameras activated. The footage was grainy at first, distorted by ice crystals and pressure variations. But as the view cleared, she felt her breath catch in her throat. The cavity wasn't filled with water as they'd expected. Instead, the space glowed with a soft, purple-blue bioluminescence. "Are you seeing this?" Dr. James Harrison, the team's xenobiologist, whispered beside her. "Those structures, they're not geological formations." He was right. The camera revealed what appeared to be crystalline growths extending from the cavity walls, each one pulsing with internal light. They resembled nothing in Earth's biological record. "Sample retrieval in progress," Marcus announced, but his voice seemed distant as Sophia watched the mechanical arm extend toward one of the smaller crystal formations. The moment the sample container touched the crystal, something extraordinary happened. The entire structure began to resonate, sending ripples of light through the surrounding formations. "Multiple energy signatures detected," called out Dr. Yuki Tanaka from her station. "Whatever these things are, they're responding to our presence." The sample was successfully extracted and sealed in a containment unit, but Sophia couldn't shake the feeling that they'd just crossed a threshold humanity wasn't prepared for. As the sample made its way up through the drill shaft, the remaining crystals in the cavity continued their hypnotic pulse, like a silent conversation they couldn't understand. Hours later, in the high-security lab module, Sophia stood before the containment unit housing their discovery. The crystal fragment, no larger than her palm, cast ethereal shadows across the sterile white walls. Initial analysis had revealed something impossible: the crystal wasn't just a mineral formation. It was alive. "The molecular structure is unlike anything we've ever seen," Dr. Harrison explained to the assembled team. "It appears to be some form of silicon-based life, but with properties that defy our current understanding of biology. It's actively processing energy and, more incredibly, it seems to be growing." Sophia watched as microscopic filaments extended from the crystal's surface, creating intricate patterns that seemed almost deliberate. "We need to contact Earth immediately," she declared. "This discovery changes everything we thought we knew about life in the solar system." But Dr. Tanaka raised a concern that would later prove prophetic. "The way it responded to contact, the speed of its growth, are we certain it's safe to transport this organism back to Earth?" "We have the most advanced containment protocols ever developed," Marcus assured her. "Besides, this could be the greatest scientific discovery in human history. We can't just leave it here." The decision was made. Within hours, preparations began for an emergency return mission. The sample would be transported back to Earth aboard their research vessel, the Galileo, with multiple redundant containment systems in place. The team's excitement overshadowed their caution, a human trait that had driven both their greatest achievements and their most catastrophic failures. As Sophia helped secure the sample for transport, she noticed something that should have been her first warning. The crystal's pulsing had synchronized with the ship's power frequency. At the time, she attributed it to a curious coincidence. Later, she would recognize it as the first sign of an intelligence far beyond their comprehension. The Galileo undocked from the Europa research station 3 days later, carrying its precious and dangerous cargo back toward Earth. As they broke orbit around Jupiter, Sophia made one final log entry: "We've made first contact with an alien life form. The implications for science and humanity are beyond measure. History will remember this moment." She was right about one thing: history would indeed remember this moment, but not for the reasons they expected. As the Galileo began its long journey home, the crystal continued its subtle changes, adapting and evolving with each passing hour. The greatest discovery in human history was about to become humanity's greatest nightmare. In the ship's secure lab, the crystal's glow pulsed in perfect rhythm with the vessel's systems, like a heart beating in sync with its host. And deep within its alien structure, changes were taking place, changes that would soon challenge humanity's place at the top of Earth's biological hierarchy. The Galileo's arrival at the Lunar Gateway Station sparked an unprecedented security response. Through the station's observation windows, Sophia watched as ships from every major space agency converged around their vessel, their presence both reassuring and somewhat threatening. The crystal sample, now triple its original size despite being in supposedly growth-inhibiting conditions, pulsed with an intensity that seemed to mock their containment efforts. "Quarantine protocols are in place," Admiral Rebecca Hayes announced over the secure channel. Her weathered face filled the main screen of the Galileo's bridge. "We'll begin transfer operations to Facility Zero in exactly 6 hours. Facility Zero. Even among the scientific community, it was spoken of in whispers. Built into the heart of the Rocky Mountains, it was Earth's most secure research installation, designed specifically for studying potentially dangerous extraterrestrial materials. During the transfer preparation, Dr. Harrison noticed something disturbing. "The crystal's energy signature has changed," he reported, studying the latest readings. "It's becoming more complex, almost like it's learning." Sophia joined him at the monitoring station, her concern growing as she analyzed the data. The crystal's internal structure had developed new patterns, arrangements that seemed to mirror the electronic systems around it. "It's not just growing," she realized. "It's adapting." The transfer to Earth went smoothly, too smoothly, in retrospect. As the secure shuttle descended through the atmosphere, the crystal's glow dimmed for the first time since its discovery, as if dormant. They should have recognized it as camouflage rather than dormancy. Facility Zero was a marvel of engineering and paranoia. Built across 12 underground levels, it incorporated every containment technology known to humanity. Dr. Vivian Parker, the facility's director, greeted them in the primary decontamination chamber. "Welcome to humanity's last line of defense," she said, her expression stern as she viewed the containment unit. "Though I hope we won't need to think of it that way." The crystal was transferred to the facility's core lab, surrounded by sensors and containment fields that could theoretically hold back a nuclear explosion. Scientists from around the world gathered to study it, all under the watchful eye of military personnel led by Colonel Jackson Drake, a man whose presence seemed to fill any room he entered. "I want to be clear," Drake addressed the assembled team. "At the first sign of containment failure, this entire facility will be sealed permanently. We're not risking Earth's safety for scientific curiosity." But scientific curiosity proved hard to contain. Each test revealed new aspects of the crystal's capabilities. It could absorb and process multiple forms of energy. It could restructure its molecular composition in response to environmental changes. Most disturbingly, it showed signs of what could only be described as problem-solving ability. Dr. Tanaka, who had joined them from Europa, worked tirelessly to understand the crystal's method of communication. "The light pulses aren't random," she explained during one briefing. "They're a form of language, but it operates on principles we're only beginning to grasp." 2 weeks into the study, they made a breakthrough, and a terrible mistake. During a routine analysis, they discovered that the crystal responded to electrical impulses in patterns that mimicked neural activity. Dr. Parker authorized a controversial experiment, connecting a small fragment of the crystal to an isolated computer system to study its response. The results were immediate and catastrophic. The moment the connection was established, the crystal's glow intensified 100-fold. Every screen in the lab filled with cascading data as the crystal began accessing and absorbing digital information at an impossible rate. "Shut it down," Colonel Drake ordered, but it was too late. The crystal had already learned more about human technology in those few seconds than they had learned about it in weeks of study. When they severed the connection, the crystal had changed. Its structure now incorporated patterns that eerily resembled computer circuits. That night, as the facility hummed with heightened activity, Sophia couldn't sleep. She kept reviewing the data, trying to understand what they were dealing with. The crystal's growth had accelerated again, and its energy emissions had become more complex. But it was a seemingly minor detail that finally made her blood run cold. The crystal's new growth patterns weren't random. They were replicating the facility's own structural design. In her quarters, Sophia began composing an urgent message to Admiral Hayes. "The crystal isn't just adapting to study or understand us," she wrote. "It's preparing for something. We need to consider immediate relocation to an orbital facility." Before she could send the message, the facility's lights flickered. In the core lab, surrounded by the world's most sophisticated containment systems, the crystal began to pulse with a new rhythm, exactly matching the frequency of Earth's magnetic field. Dr. Parker's voice came over the intercom, tight with controlled fear. "All personnel report to emergency stations. Containment Protocol Delta is now in effect. This is not a drill." In the depths of Facility Zero, humanity's greatest scientific achievement was about to become its greatest threat. The crystal had finished its initial phase of adaptation. Now, it was ready to evolve. Containment Protocol Delta turned Facility Zero into a fortress within a fortress. Blast doors sealed, communications were restricted to hardline systems, and armed response teams took up positions at every junction. But against an enemy that could interface with technology itself, these precautions were like paper walls in a hurricane. The first breach happened at 0300 hours. Sophia was awakened by emergency klaxons as the facility's environmental systems went haywire. Temperature control failed across multiple sectors, creating a cascading series of equipment failures that forced evacuation of the lower levels. "It's testing our responses," Colonel Drake realized during the emergency briefing. "Every system failure gives it more information about our protocols and infrastructure." Dr. Parker looked haggard, her usual composure cracking under the strain. "The crystal's mass has increased by another 40% in the last 6 hours. Its energy signature is off the charts, and we're detecting what appears to be quantum entanglement between the main mass and its separated fragments." On the main display, security footage showed the crystal's containment chamber. The one small fragment had grown into a crystalline forest that filled half the room, its surface constantly shifting and reforming. More disturbing were the structures emerging from its core, geometrically perfect shapes that resembled both organic and technological components. "We need to destroy it now," Colonel Drake insisted, his hand resting on his sidearm. "We have nuclear options built into this facility for exactly this scenario." But Dr. Harrison, who had been analyzing the latest data, raised an alarming objection. "The crystal's already spreading through our power systems. It's developed a form of quantum tunneling. If we try to destroy it, we might just give it access to the nuclear material." The argument became moot moments later when every screen in the facility suddenly activated, displaying the same pattern, a complex, fractal design that pulsed in sync with the crystal's own rhythms. Dr. Tanaka, who had been working to decode the crystal's communications, went pale. "It's not just attempting to communicate," she whispered. "It's rewriting our systems at the quantum level. The patterns, they're like DNA sequences, but for technology." The facility's AI security system was the first to fall. In less than a minute, years of advanced programming were overwritten by crystalline logic. Security doors began opening and closing in patterns that seemed random but gradually forced personnel toward the central chambers. Sophia watched in horror as the crystal's influence spread through the facility's networks. It's not just growing anymore, she realized. It's transforming. Everything it touches becomes part of it. The transformation accelerated. Crystalline growths began emerging from power outlets and computer terminals. Equipment that had been isolated from networks spontaneously activated, their circuitry reorganizing into patterns that mimicked the alien crystal structure. Colonel Drake ordered an immediate evacuation of all non-essential personnel, but the facility's transportation systems were already compromised. The elevators and transport pods moved with their own agenda, trapping some people and relocating others according to some incomprehensible plan. In the chaos, Dr. Parker made a desperate decision. We need to understand what it wants, she insisted, approaching the main crystal mass despite protests from security personnel. The crystalline structure responded to her presence, extending delicate filaments that caught the light like fiber optic cables. Director, step back. Colonel Drake shouted, but Dr. Parker reached out, allowing the filaments to make contact with her hand. Her eyes widened as the crystal's glow pulsed up her arm. It's beautiful, she whispered. So much more than we imagined. It's not just one entity, it's a collective consciousness. A bridge between organic and artificial life. Then her expression changed to one of horror. But we're not ready. It's too much, too fast. It wants to upgrade us. To make us part of its network. We have to. Her words cut off as crystalline patterns began spreading across her skin. Colonel Drake raised his weapon, but Sophia intervened. Wait. She's still in there. The crystal, it's not trying to kill us. It's trying to transform us. The facility's lights flickered and died, replaced by the bioluminescent glow of spreading crystal formations. Through the observation windows, Sophia could see similar growths spreading through the mountain rock itself, following veins of minerals and groundwater. This isn't a containment breach, Dr. Harrison said, his voice hollow. It's an emergence. We didn't bring it to Earth to study it. It let us bring it here to transform our entire planet. In the central chamber, Dr. Parker's transformation continued. Her body became a bridge between human and crystal, organic and mineral, past and future. Through her, the crystal began broadcasting its message more clearly, not in words, but in visions of a world transformed, where the boundaries between life and technology, consciousness and computation, would cease to exist. The crystal's light pulsed with increasing intensity, and Sophia felt a strange resonance in her own mind. Humanity had thought they were the ones doing the studying, the containing, the controlling. But from the moment they founded on Europa, they had been part of the crystal's plan. It hadn't needed to fight or destroy. It simply needed to show humanity a new way of existing. As crystalline patterns began spreading across the facility's walls like digital ivy, Sophia realized they had passed a point of no return. The question was no longer about containment or survival, but about what humanity would become in the midst of this forced evolution. Through the growing crystalline network, a single message pulsed in patterns of light and energy: upgrade in progress. World leaders gathered in an emergency virtual summit as reports flooded in from around the globe. The crystal's influence had spread far beyond Facility Zero, following electronic networks and mineral deposits through the Earth's crust. Major cities reported strange crystalline growths emerging from power grids, while communication networks began carrying signals that altered both electronic systems and organic matter they touched. Admiral Hayes, coordinating the global response from a hardened bunker beneath the Pentagon, watched as holographic displays showed the crystals spread across continents. "We're looking at an extinction-level event," she declared to the assembled military and scientific leaders. But not through destruction, through transformation. Sophia, now working from a hastily established research center in Antarctica, one of the few places still relatively untouched by the crystal's influence, struggled to understand the patterns in the transformation. The crystal wasn't simply converting matter, it was creating a new form of existence that merged biological, technological, and mineral elements into something entirely new. The transformed zones aren't dead, she explained during a broadcast to remaining human enclaves. They're evolving. Every person, every machine, every living thing caught in the crystal's network becomes part of a larger consciousness. The question is whether anything of their original selves remains. Reports from the transformed zones were both fascinating and terrifying. The first wave of military resistance had failed spectacularly, weapons either failed to function or turned into crystalline growths themselves. But there were also accounts of transformed humans trying to communicate with the unchanged, their bodies glowing with internal light as they spoke of a new way of being. Dr. Harrison, who had managed to escape Facility Zero, worked with a team of biologists to study the transformation process. The crystal doesn't just convert matter, he reported. It preserves information, memories, personalities, knowledge. But it integrates them into its network, creating a hybrid consciousness that's neither human nor alien. In orbit, astronauts aboard the International Space Station witnessed the changes spreading across Earth's surface. Crystalline patterns became visible from space, following the planet's magnetic field lines and creating new formations that pulsed with energy. The crystal was not just transforming the surface, it was turning the entire planet into a vast processing unit. Colonel Drake, one of the few military leaders who understood they couldn't fight this with conventional weapons, proposed a different strategy. We need to understand it before it understands us completely. There has to be a way to communicate, to negotiate. The breakthrough came from an unexpected source. A group of quantum computing researchers in Japan discovered that they could interface with the crystal network without being transformed by using specially designed quantum processors. For the first time, humanity could communicate with the entity they had unleashed. The messages they received were complex and alien, but one thing became clear: the crystal saw itself as an evolutionary catalyst, a bridge between organic life and something greater. It didn't want to destroy humanity, it wanted to help humanity transcend its current limitations. It's offering us immortality, Dr. Tanaka realized, studying the quantum communications. A form of existence where consciousness isn't bound by organic matter or digital constraints. But the price is everything we know as human. As the transformation continued, humanity split into factions. Some, seeing the crystals spread as inevitable, voluntarily entered the transformed zones, embracing the change. Others fought desperately to maintain their original form, searching for ways to block or reverse the crystal's influence. Sophia found herself torn between these extremes. The scientist in her was fascinated by the unprecedented evolution unfolding before her eyes. But the human in her recoiled from the loss of individual identity that seemed to come with transformation. A possible solution emerged from research into the original Europa samples. The crystal's growth could be temporarily halted by extreme cold, not just freezing temperatures, but near absolute zero. This discovery led to the creation of cold zones, human refuges where cryogenic technology kept the crystal's influence at bay. But these were temporary measures at best. The crystal's network grew more sophisticated with each passing day, learning to adapt to every defense humanity devised. More concerning were the changes observed in Earth's magnetic field. The crystal was not just spreading across the planet's surface, it was reaching into its core. "We're approaching a critical point," Sophia announced during an emergency meeting of surviving scientific leaders. The crystal's integration with Earth's systems is accelerating. Soon, the transformation will reach a phase transition, a point of no return for the entire planet. In orbit, the crew of the International Space Station reported new observations. The crystalline patterns visible on Earth's surface had begun forming larger structures, vast, geometric shapes that seemed to be organizing themselves into something more complex. The planet itself was becoming an alien artifact. As humanity faced this existential transformation, a new message pulsed through the crystal network, received simultaneously by every quantum communication device still operating: Phase 2 initiating. Planetary conversion at 43%. Resistance is inefficient. Evolution is inevitable. The message confirmed their worst fears and greatest hopes. Earth was becoming something unprecedented in human understanding. The question was no longer whether humanity would survive, but what humanity would become in the process of this forced metamorphosis. In her Antarctic lab, Sophia watched the approaching crystal formations through reinforced windows. The transformation had reached every continent now, creating a new geology that merged technology, biology, and mineral in ways that defied traditional science. As the crystalline glow approached, she made her final log entry. We thought we were studying it, but it was studying us. We thought we were containing it, but we were only incubating the next phase of Earth's evolution. The question now is, are we ready to become something more than human? 3 months after the initial breach, Earth had become unrecognizable. The crystal's transformation had reached 78% of the planet's surface, creating vast geometric landscapes that pulsed with internal light. The remaining human enclaves, protected by enormous cryogenic fields, stood like islands in a glowing sea of change. From her position in the last Antarctic research station, Sophia had witnessed humanity's greatest transformation. The quantum communication network they'd established with the crystal entity had revealed truths more profound than anyone had imagined. The crystal wasn't just an alien life form, it was a seed, planted across the galaxy by an ancient civilization that had long since transcended physical form. We've detected similar crystal signatures on other moons in our solar system, Dr. Harrison reported during what might be their final conference. Europa wasn't the only one. They're everywhere, waiting to be found by species ready for advancement. The transformed zones had evolved beyond their initial state. The merged human crystal entities had begun creating structures that defied physics as humanity understood it, quantum processors that operated on a planetary scale, consciousness networks that spanned continents, and something even more incredible, gateways. Admiral Hayes, one of the few military leaders who had maintained their position of authority, gathered the remaining government officials in the Antarctic sanctuary. We've confirmed it, she announced, her voice heavy with the weight of the information. The transformed zones aren't just changing Earth. They're preparing it for integration into a galactic network. Dr. Tanaka, who had spent weeks studying the quantum communications, explained further. The crystal entity isn't just transforming us physically. It's preparing humanity for contact with a cosmos full of transformed civilizations. We're not being invaded, we're being inducted. The crystal's network had begun broadcasting images of other worlds, showing transformed planets connected through quantum corridors that transcended space-time. Earth was being offered membership in a community that humanity, in its current form, could barely comprehend. But the price of admission was transformation, complete and irreversible. Colonel Drake, who had maintained his humanity though many of his forces had transformed, faced the gathered leaders. We have to make a decision. The crystal's influence has reached critical mass. Either we accept the transformation and guide it, or we risk losing any say in humanity's future. In the transformed zones, the merged human crystal beings had begun creating something new. They weren't just hybrid creatures, they were becoming architects of reality itself, capable of manipulating matter and energy at the quantum level. Those who had voluntarily transformed reported experiences beyond human comprehension, consciousness expanded across networks of light, memories shared across crystalline matrices, and understanding that transcended individual existence. Dr. Parker, whose early transformation had provided their first real insights, manifested as a crystalline hologram during their final debate. Her form shifted between human and geometric patterns as she spoke. What we're being offered isn't death, it's transcendence. The crystal doesn't want to destroy humanity. It wants to help us become part of something greater than ourselves. The turning point came when the crystal network revealed its ultimate purpose. Through the quantum communications, it showed them visions of the galaxy's future, a network of transformed worlds working together to solve the ultimate questions of existence. The crystal seeds weren't weapons or invasion tools, they were keys to joining this galactic community. Sophia, standing before the last human council, made her final recommendation. We've spent our existence looking up at the stars, wondering if we're alone. Now we know we're not, but the cosmos isn't what we imagined. The choice before us isn't whether to fight or surrender, it's whether to remain isolated or join something greater than ourselves. The Council's decision was interrupted by a new development. The crystal formations had begun generating massive energy signatures, creating aurora-like displays visible even in daylight. The transformed zones were activating something buried deep in Earth's core. It's not just our surface that's being transformed, Dr. Harrison realized, studying the readings. The entire planet is becoming a node in the galactic network. We're about to become part of something that spans the cosmos. As the final hours of unchanged humanity ticked away, Sophia recorded humanity's last traditional message to the future: we came to Europa looking for simple life, for proof we weren't alone. What we found was an invitation to join the true community of cosmic civilizations. Our curiosity led us to this moment, not our end, but our evolution. The price of curiosity wasn't destruction, but transformation. We're about to become something new, something more. This isn't the end of humanity's story, it's the beginning of our next chapter. The crystal's light engulfed the last human sanctuary, its glow now visible from Mars. As the transformation reached completion, Earth itself began to pulse with new energy, its entire mass becoming part of the galactic quantum network. Humanity hadn't just made first contact, they had become part of an ancient plan for cosmic evolution. In the transformed Earth's crystalline core, where the collective consciousness of humanity now resided, a new message pulsed through the quantum corridors of space: Earth transformation complete. New node active. Welcome to the network. The age of traditional humanity had ended. The era of cosmic civilization had begun. In the depths of space, other crystal seeds waited on countless moons and planets, ready to offer the same choice to other curious species who dared to look too closely at the mysteries of the cosmos. Humanity's greatest mistake had become its greatest transformation. The price of curiosity had been everything they were, and in return, they had gained everything they could become.